Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. When Aubrey took in the satisfied look on her mother's face, a sense of annoyance bloomed in her chest. Since Lucian no longer loves that batch, I have to become Mrs. Farwell. Not only do I want to be the lady of the family, but I also want to have his heart. She wanted Lucian to treat her the same way he did 6 years ago. Gina bobbed her head in agreement. She was not too concerned about that as long as the marriage union between the Farwell family and the Pearson family remained. Aubrey was upset to see her mother's unfazed expression, but she soon thought about Estella. Everything she had said to Lucian was only to get his sympathy. It was a fact that she had little experience with a child. On the other hand, her mother, Gina, had raised her. Aubrey guessed that Gina had to be more experienced in childcare than her. With that thought in mind, Aubrey smiled and pulled her mother to the couch. Ads by PubFuture. Mom, there's something I want to ask you. What is it? Pursing her lips and frowning, Aubrey asked, how do I interact with a kid? You know Essie has the last say in this marriage. If she doesn't like me, Lucian will surely break off the engagement eventually. That was something the Pearsons knew well. Lucian had not married Aubrey in the past 6 years because Estella had been rejecting Aubrey the entire time. However, ever since they found out the root of the problem, they had been trying many ways to make Estella accept Aubrey. Yet, regardless of what they did, the girl remained the same. In the end, Aubrey's attitude toward Estella became worse and worse. It's all that girl's fault. Gina did not know how to answer Aubrey's question. Essie treats me almost the same as she does with you. You were brought up by your nanny. I don't have much experience in taking care of children. Aubrey's expression darkened. Gina hastily suggested, they're kids, right? They must like the same stuff like food and toys. Just get her something she likes. Upon hearing her mother's useless idea, Aubrey dropped her smile and waved dismissively. Forget it. I think of a way myself. With that, she rose to her feet and went upstairs. Gina could only watch her daughter leave in anxiety and resignation. Without a doubt, she hoped that Estella would accept Aubrey soon so that the two families could be united in a marriage union. Yet, there was nothing Gina could do to help. Meanwhile, Aubrey kept thinking about the way Estella rejected her as she stormed upstairs in frustration. This little brat used to be a mute, so I could threaten her into submission. But it's different now. If I do the same thing I did in the past, the little brat might tattletale to Lucian. If that happened, the Pearson family might even come to an end, let alone ensure my spot as Mrs. Farwell. Looks like I have no choice but to make that little brat happy. With that thought in mind, Aubrey gritted her teeth and fished out her phone to call Frida. Frida picked up in no time. Aubrey, what's the matter? Do you know any psychologists? Introduce me to one. Need is a psychologist, and I'll get some tips from them. Frida was confounded by Aubrey's request. So what happened to you? Why are you looking for a psychologist? Aubrey was already irritated, so Frida's questions only irked her even more. It's none of your business. Just introduce a psychologist to me. Frida did not dare to ask any more questions after that. The next morning, she invited a psychologist over. He's the best psychologist in our hospital. You can ask him anything. The tall skinny man beside Frida politely greeted Aubrey. Greetings, Miss Pearson. Aubrey inclined her head. Let's talk upstairs. With that, she led Frida and the psychologist to the study on the second floor. Frida followed her in confusion. She had thought that Aubrey had something secretive and personal. However, the way Aubrey was acting clearly meant that she did not mind Frida listening in to her matter. What's going on exactly, Aubrey? Aubrey did not answer her right away. Only after entering the study did Aubrey turn around to ask the psychologist, how do I interact with a child with autism? How can I make her like me faster? Those words made Frida realize what was going on. Are you talking about Estella? Aubrey nodded in confirmation, but her gaze was still fixed on the psychologist. The psychologist furrowed his brows and slowly started, well. Every child is different, and the signs they display are different. I don't have a specific plan, but there is one thing you must have when you interact with an autistic child, and that is to be patient. Anything else? The psychologist shook his head. I can't provide a proper answer unless I interact with her. To sum it up, his words were useless to Aubrey. Aubrey shot him a look of annoyance and snapped. Got it. You can leave now. Patience, patience, patience. It's always patience. I'm sick of hearing this. I don't even know how many times Lucian has repeated this to me yesterday. That brat is so repulsive to me. I can't even get the chance to come close to her, so what's the point of having patience? If I keep dragging this on, who can swear to me that Lucian won't have a change of heart again? The thought of that possibility made Aubrey scowl. After sending the psychologist off, Frida returned to see the scowl on Aubrey's face cautiously. She asked, Aubrey, why are you suddenly asking about Essie? As far as she knew, Estella did not want Aubrey around her. Because of that, Aubrey had been thinking of ways of making Estella's life hard all along. Frida was confused as to why Aubrey was suddenly interested in getting along with Estella. Why else? Aubrey grumbled. Lucian came to me yesterday and told me that he'll consider keeping the engagement, but Essie will have to accept me first. A surprised look flashed past Frida's eyes at that. Really, Lucian's changing his mind? What about Roxanne? Aubrey was already worried about Lucian rekindling his relationship with Roxanne, so she was peeved by Frida's mention of Roxanne. Seeing how Aubrey's expression turned colder, Frida shifted the conversation back to Estella. What are you planning to do with Essie, then? If I knew what to do, I wouldn't have asked you to get a psychologist. In the end, this was pointless too. The two of them fell silent as they ruminate over various methods. A beat later, Aubrey recalled the idea her mother mentioned the day before. She's just a kid. I'll give her more gifts. I refuse to believe she'll still hate me after that. Frida drew her brows together. Then do you know what Essie likes? The duo looked at each other again. Even though they technically watched Estella grow up, they knew nothing about what she liked. This is frustrating. Aubrey groaned. Why are kids so hard to please? Lucian, too. If he has decided to take me as his wife, we'll have our own kids in the future. Why must he wait for Essie to accept me? I've already planned this out. If I get to marry Lucian, we'll have to have a kid of our own. In the future, Farwell Group's assets will be my kids. As for Estella, I will spare her some of the assets, just enough for her to get by. Frida said with a smile, You're right, but that'll have to wait until you're married first. Aubrey rolled her eyes at her. What, then? I'm suggesting buying gifts for the girl, but neither of us knows what she likes. How long will she take to accept me if this goes on? Who can swear to me that the second Roxanne won't appear during this period? I've been waiting for 6 years, and I'm not going to wait any longer. I don't have the courage to risk it anymore. Since Lucian is relenting this time, I'll have to hold on tightly to this opportunity. After a long moment of silence, Frida said, In that case, why don't you try to get along with Essie sincerely? What? Aubrey barked out a laugh. Me? Getting along with that girl? If not for that little brat, Lucian wouldn't have dragged this on for 6 years. These 6 years I've lost all because of that stupid girl. In fact, it's because of her that Lucian is getting more and more distant from me. These were things that Aubrey had carved into her mind. Wanting her to get along with Estella was akin to a joke to her. Frida could guess what Aubrey was thinking, so she tried her best to persuade her. It's just temporary. Once you marry Lucian, Essie will be in your control too. You can treat her in any way you want by then. Despite her cruel words, Estella was still a girl Frida had watched grow up. Hence, She had to squeeze those words out of her throat. Nevertheless, Aubrey still did not like her suggestion. I can't help but think about how that girl made my life so tough whenever I see her, so how am I supposed to get along with her? Frida smiled. But that's the only way she can accept you quickly. Children are sensitive beings. They will notice any fake sincerity from you right away. When Frida saw the reluctant look on Aubrey's face, she had no choice but to continue trying to persuade her. Lucian is popular. Even now, you still haven't married him. There are many daughters from prestigious families who have their eyes on him. If you keep dragging this on, by now, she and Aubrey were in the same boat. To hide the things she had done for Aubrey, Frida had to think of everything she could to make Aubrey Lucian's wife. Only after hearing that from Frida did Aubrey finally relent a little. Say, what should I do then? Frida let out a sigh of relief. Essie must already know that she can't meet Roxanne anymore, so she'll be in a bad mood these few days. Spend more time accompanying her whenever you can. That way, you can subtly remind her that you're around. Even if Essie still won't accept you, at the very least, Lucian will know that you've tried. Aubrey nodded slowly. Frida's right. Even if I can't change Estella's mind, at the very least, I have to let Lucian think that I care about Estella. Aubrey heeded Frida's advice. In the afternoon of the very same day, she headed to the Farwell residence. She even bought Estella some cakes on her way there. After arriving at the manor, Aubrey pressed on the doorbell. Catalina hesitated for a moment when she saw Aubrey at the door. However, she opened the door for the woman when she recalled what Lucian said. Miss Pearson, she greeted Catalina respectfully. Lowering her head, Catalina took a step back. She was trying her best to stay away from Aubrey's sight. They weren't exactly seeing eye to eye when they met the last few times. Though Catalina only did as she was told, she couldn't help it when Aubrey still held prejudice against her. Noticing that Catalina was trying to avoid her, Aubrey pursed her lips in disapproval and sneered. You're fast to open the door this time. Catalina kept quiet. Where's Lucian? He's not home. Aubrey did not wish to dwell on Catalina further. After all, she had already planned to fire the latter after marrying Lucian. Mr. Farwell headed to the office to work overtime early in the morning. Before leaving, Lucian had told Catalina that Aubrey was allowed entry at the Farwell residence at any time. That was the reason Catalina opened the door for Aubrey. Aubrey nodded and cast a glance at the stairs leading upstairs. How about Essie? I'm here to visit her. Catalina tensed up. Nonetheless, she chose to answer truthfully. Miss Estella is in her bedroom. With the cake in one hand, Aubrey no longer paid heed to Catalina and headed upstairs. Catalina followed closely behind her. In the morning, before Lucian left, he had told her not to let Estella and Aubrey be alone for the time being. The truth was, he still had reservations about Aubrey. Noticing that Catalina was tailing her, Aubrey halted in exasperation. Why are you following me? Do you think I'm going to hurt Essie? Mr. Farwell asked me to keep close tabs on Miss Estella. She might not feel well these 2 days. Aubrey was not pleased that Catalina had brought Lucian up. Nonetheless, she said nothing. After she reached Estella's bedroom, Aubrey knocked on her door and tactfully kept quiet. It did not take long for Estella to open the door. The little girl thought it was Catalina and had not expected it to be Aubrey instead. Her expression stiffened, and it soon turned into an alarmed look. Aubrey noticed the change in Estella's demeanor and was dismayed. However, the recalled Frida advice and suppressed the hatred she had for Estella. She managed and lowered herself to level with Estella. Essie, look. I've brought some cakes for you. Do you want to have it downstairs or in your room? As if afraid that Estella could not see the cakes, Aubrey waved them in front of the little girl. Estella appeared indifferent and turned to Catalina with a deadpan look on her face. She didn't want to be alone with Aubrey and wanted Catalina to send her away. Despite realizing what Estella wanted, Catalina was unsure of what she could do about the situation. The only thing that she could think of was to ensure that Estella was not left alone with Aubrey. Aubrey's patience soon wore thin when Estella did not respond to her. However, she still had to continue with her act. You don't like cakes? Why don't I take you out for a spin in the afternoon? We can go play with Grandma, Aubrey coaxed. Aubrey alone was already too much for Estella, and she grew even more repulsed after hearing that the woman was planning to bring her to see Sonia. Catalina couldn't bear to see Estella suffer. Miss Pearson, Miss Estella has just woken up and might still feel sleepy. Why don't you let her sleep a little while longer? Estella hurriedly nodded along and even feigned a yawn. The innocent looks on her face made her acting look convincing. A furious look fleeted across Aubrey's face, but she managed to regain her composure. It seems my timing is not right then. Go on and rest, Essie. Feeling utterly relieved, Estella didn't even say anything before hastily closing the door. The smile on Aubrey's face faded as the door shut in her face. She wanted to scowl at Catalina and tell her to mind her own business. However, she thought that Catalina must have followed her on Lucian's order. Surely, the woman had been tasked with observing how she was getting along with Estella. Aubrey reckoned that since she was putting up an act, she might as well put in more work to make it believable. With that in mind, Aubrey recomposed herself. She got up and cast a glance at Catalina. I'll come over more often these 2 days to accompany Essie. I only brought cakes because I thought she liked them. Anyway, it seems like I'm mistaken. You've been taking care of Essie for many years. Do you know what she likes? Then she flashed Catalina a rare smile. Catalina lowered her head as the disdain for Aubrey festered in her heart. She had been taking care of Estella for many years, and all these years, Aubrey had always taken the liberty to come uninvited. Yet, the wretched woman had the cheek to ask her what Estella liked. It was obvious that Aubrey had never taken Estella's interests to heart. Not realizing Catalina's disdain toward her, Aubrey went on. I was too ignorant of Essie's feelings in the past and had been shoving my own interests at her. It's really no wonder that she dislikes me. I know I'm wrong now. Catalina, I hope you can guide me on the right path from now on. Aubrey's tone was sincere. She completely disregarded the fact that she had been treating Catalina harshly these few days. Of course, Catalina was reluctant to divulge a single thing. Miss Estella doesn't particularly fancy anything. Besides, I'm only the cook around here. I don't really know anything about her preference. Then what does she like to eat? I'll try to learn. Catalina deliberately told her something that was difficult to make. Aubrey's brows creased a little and were almost unnoticeable. Despite the fact that the dish was difficult to prepare, Aubrey didn't seem bothered. After all, she could always buy it. They headed downstairs, and right when Catalina thought she was leaving, Aubrey sat on the couch. It's not likely that Essie will sleep for a long time. I'm just going to wait for her to wake up here. Then Aubrey took out her phone and texted Frida. Needless to say, she hadn't stayed to wait for Estella to wake up. She just wanted to show her face in front of Lucian when he was back. A whole afternoon passed by, and still, Estella did not head downstairs. Instead, she unexpectedly heard Catalina receiving a phone call from Lucian. Aubrey observed Catalina intently. After the latter hung up the call, she immediately asked, what did Lucian say? When is he coming back? Mr. Farwell said he's going to be late today and asked me to bring Miss Estella for dinner first, Catalina replied. Are you going to stay for dinner, Miss Pearson? Aubrey's expression turned grim as she got up from the couch. It's okay. I've got an appointment later. Before she left, Aubrey reminded Catalina, please pass the word to Essie when she comes downstairs later. Catalina nodded respectfully and saw her to the door. Lucian had wanted to go back to eat with Estella. Estella had been in a bad mood ever since Aubrey came by the day before, and Lucian was afraid that she would go back to how she used to be. However, in the afternoon, Jonathan abruptly called. As it turned out, Jonathan had heard about his and Roxanne's matter from somewhere, and that was why he made the call. Instantly, Lucian's mood soured, and he ended up inviting Jonathan out for a drink that night. At night, Lucian, who was wearing a dress shirt and had his jacket draped on his arm, strode out of the first floor of the Farwell Group office building. Right as he walked out of the entrance, he heard the sound of a car honking. He turned around and spotted Jonathan's car, which was parked right in front of the building. Lucian lifted a brow and walked over. Didn't we agree to meet at the club? Why are you here? Jonathan wound down the window and winked at him. How can I let a crestfallen man drive? I'm your buddy, and I'll be your driver this time. Lucian's gaze darkened at that, and he pursed his lips. For how can I be crestfallen over nothing? He opened the car door and got into the car before tossing his jacket on the back seat. Jonathan frowned, and he parted his lips to say something. Yet, when he turned around, he saw that Lucian had already closed his eyes to nap. Clearly, Lucian did not want to listen to anything else from him. In resignation, Jonathan looked away and started the car. As it turned out, the invitation for a drink was really just that Lucian did not even want to spend any time talking. Things must be really bad between them this time, Jonathan thought. On the way to their destination, both kept their silence, deep in their own thoughts. Half an hour later, the car came to a stop outside the club. Both men opened their doors and got out of the car. Jonathan gave his keys to the valet, then went upstairs to the private rooms with Lucian. This was a club they frequented, and they knew the owner of the club. Right as they took their seats, the owner sent some of his employees to serve them a few bottles of expensive wine before smartly telling the rest of his employees not to disrupt them from then on. Only when Lucian and Jonathan were the only ones left in the room did Jonathan open the bottle of expensive wine. Then he poured a glass for Lucian and himself. I hear that Essie's matter ended up quite messy. On his way to the club, Jonathan had been thinking of how he was going to make Lucian talk, and in the end, he decided to start with Estella. Everyone in their social circle knew about Estella changing kindergartens. The kindergarten she had transferred to was one catered toward the rich and the powerful. On Estella's first day, when the parents found out that their children were in the same class as the daughter of the Farwell family, they began plotting how they should curry favor with the Farwells through her. However, Estella did not appear on the next day. The parents had quickly looked into the matter. It took no time before Estella's matter became a well-known one in the circle. There was nothing Lucian wanted to hide, so he nodded indifferently. Jonathan raised his brows in surprise. Essie agreed to it? How did you convince her? For a while after that, the room was silent. Jonathan slowly realized that Lucian did not get Estella to agree to it in the first place. That must be why she's throwing a tantrum and stopped going to kindergarten after a day. Jonathan cleared his throat awkwardly. How is Essie feeling recently? Lucian picked up his wineglass and took a sip from it. She was sulking the past 2 days, but she's fine now. Jonathan was even more taken aback by that. She's all right after such a short period of time? Does that mean she's doing much better now? She spent a day at Roxanne's, Lucian said nonchalantly. Jonathan could guess what Lucian was trying to say. It was not because Estella's condition was getting better for her mood to have improved so quickly. It was because she met Roxanne. However, Jonathan found the way Lucian mentioned Roxanne strange. Is he really planning to cut ties with Roxanne? Jonathan's confusion was clearly written on his face. Noticing that, Lucian said, I talked to her about it. It's true that we can't progress any further in our relationship, so we've decided to do as she says to become strangers. Are you really giving up just like that? Jonathan could not believe what he had just heard. Lucian frowned. What do you think? You can't possibly ask me to cast aside my dignity to beg Roxanne to change her mind. I can't do that, And she won't change her mind anyway. Jonathan drew his brows together. What about Essie? Dr. Jarvis is her mother, and the girl adores her too. The mention of Estella made something flash past Lucian's eyes. I've talked about this with Aubrey. She'll treat Essie well, and as time passes, I'm sure Essie will slowly accept her. Getting Essie to accept Aubrey? Jonathan found that incredulous. He had invited Lucian out because Frida had gleefully told him about how Lucian was planning to stay engaged to Aubrey. Perhaps it was because Jonathan had been Lucian's wingman in the past. Frida was exceptionally arrogant when she told him about the news. Of course, Jonathan did not believe it. He was the one who witnessed Lucian courting Roxanne in all the ways he could think of, so he found it hard to believe that Lucian would give up on Roxanne so easily. Even if Lucian did give up on Roxanne, Jonathan felt that he should not have chosen Aubrey. Estella's dislike of Aubrey throughout the 6 years was apparent to them all. How could Lucian marry a woman that Essie did not like and make her Essie's mother? Even when he heard the confirmation from Lucian, he still thought that he was dreaming. Essie hasn't accepted Aubrey in 6 years. Do you really think she'll suddenly change her mind? Lucian was unfazed, however. We still have to give it a try. What happened between you and Dr. Jarvis? You're not someone who gives up this easily. Silence ensued. Lucian lowered his gaze and drank away. Jonathan downed his wine and huffed. If I had known that you were going to give up so easily, I wouldn't have helped you back then. Look, you can choose not to see Dr. Jarvis from now on, but the Queen family still has to interact with her. How am I supposed to face Dr. Jarvis now? Jonathan scrunched up his face in frustration. Also, my grandfather told me to take care of Dr. Jarvis. What am I supposed to say to him about this? As he spoke, he carefully observed the expression on Lucian's face. He said that to find out if Lucian would have a change of heart. Alas, despite his long speech, Lucian's expression remained the same. It was as if he had not heard Jonathan at all. Right as Jonathan put down his glass in resignation and was about to declare that it was none of his business anymore, Lucian spoke. I don't think I should give up so easily either. After all, the woman's Essie's biological mother. Jonathan brightened up upon hearing that, and he asked, does Dr. Jarvis know about her relationship with Essie? If she doesn't, you should tell her about it. I'm sure she'll change her mind. That was a thought he had since a long time ago, but as the matter was Lucian's family matter, it was up to Lucian whether or not he wanted to tell Roxanne about Estella's birth circumstances. However, it seemed that the two were going to lose each other again, so Jonathan steeled himself to make the suggestion. Almost immediately, Lucian's hand holding the wineglass froze in midair. Tell Essie's birth circumstances to that woman? Maybe I would have given this a thought if Roxanne hadn't given up on me. But now, it's pointless. Thinking that his suggestion was fantastic, Jonathan looked at Lucian in anticipation as he waited for his response. If you still want her back by your side, this is the best way to get her to come back. A beat later, Lucian finished his drink and uttered quietly, "No." Jonathan's eyes widened. He's really planning to give up on Roxanne. As she can't give me what I want, and she can't give Essie what Essie wants. What I can give her isn't something she wants either, Lucian said. Jonathan could only blink at him, bewildered. Why do you say that? Lucian's eyes fluttered shut as he recalled the memories of their time together. What Essie wants is for her mother to be by her side, but clearly, Roxanne's preoccupied with the Damaris family's project. Her full focus is on it, and even when Essie went to her, she left the two kids to take care of Essie instead. It was the same for the last time. The girl was so miserable, and Roxanne heard it, but she still chose to prioritize her work. Lucian pursed his lips, the air around him turning a few degrees colder. At the start, I was hoping that she would stay in the country for that project, but who knew that she would throw her entire self into it? Even now, He still could not figure out whether Roxanne saw the project as something so important because of the project itself or because of the one in charge of it. Jonathan nearly jumped in fright at the change in Lucian's mood, but when he heard Lucian's words of complaint, he became amused. Then a smile appeared on his face. Why are you smiling?" Lucian asked before shooting him a cold look. The smile on Jonathan's face remained wide. "I'm just thinking about how even you can't escape from something like this." Lucian knitted his brows in confusion. Jonathan cleared his throat but deliberately kept quiet for a while. It was only when he sensed the air around him turn even colder did he shudder and said, "You say Dr. Jarvis is too focused on her work and has neglected Essie and your feelings. But think about this from another angle. Didn't you do this to Dr. Jarvis 6 years ago?" Just as those words went past Jonathan's lips, Lucian tightened his grip on his glass. 6 years ago? You must have treated Dr. Jarvis far worse 6 years ago than how Dr. Jarvis is treating you now, Jonathan went on. Back then, I wondered about what she would feel about you focusing on work and Aubrey only. I thought she would have left in no time, but to my surprise, she actually lived with you for so many years and even gave birth to your child. At that moment, a thought seemed to have popped up in Jonathan's head. It looks like Dr. Jarvis was deeply in love with you back then. You say you're a persevering man, but you're giving up on her in mere months just because she's a little more serious about her work. In contrast, Dr. Jarvis had stayed by your side for years. Jonathan even felt bad for Roxanne when he thought about the things she had to go through during those years. Once he was done saying his piece, he clicked his tongue and shook his head. Lucian's expression darkened. How did she persevere during all those years, then? I thought she was being unreasonable when she abruptly departed back then. Now that I think about it, she must have reached her limits. What thoughts did she have on the night of her departure? The recollection of that time made Lucian's heart ache. This is my fault, he said after a beat. Jonathan stiffened. This was the first time he had heard Lucian admit that he was wrong so easily. I did this to her 6 years ago, and now she's doing the same thing to me. The look of self-deprecation was bright in Lucian's eyes. Perhaps this is karma, but it's late by 6 years. Hearing the bitterness lacing Lucian's words, Jonathan lowered his gaze as his heart began feeling heavy. He only mentioned what had happened 6 years ago because the matter popped up in his head. He did not mean to make Lucian feel guilty. In that case, why don't you put aside your original plan and court Dr. Jarvis again? It's to fix the regret the two of you have. Jonathan thought that Lucian would finally consider that option, but the moment he said that, Lucian's unhesitating rejection came. It's too late. Lucian filled his glass again and downed the wine. Jonathan did not even know how many times Lucian had already filled his glass. He stubbornly continued, Since you know you've done wrong, why do you not want to fix the mistake?" I can't do that. I've hurt Roxanne terribly, so how can I ask her to forgive me? I'm certain that Roxanne's already sick of how clingy I've been during this time. She's only dealing with me half-heartedly as an act of courtesy. A wave of frustration rose in Lucian, and he started downing one glass after another. It was only then Jonathan realized he had been too busy trying to change Lucian's mind. Lucian had finished the whole bottle of wine by himself. The alcohol content in the wines that the owner served them was high. On most days, they would only drink a glass or two and focus more on the conversation. However, it was different that day. "I know you can hold your drink, Lucian, but you still can't drink like this." Jonathan quickly shot out his hand to stop Lucian. Lucian, stop drinking." Yet, before his fingers could touch the glass, Lucian stopped him. "I asked you to come today to drink, not to hear you go on and on about nonsense." Lucian tilted his head back to down another glass of wine. In the end, Jonathan could only sigh under his breath as he watched Lucian open another bottle. Forget it. The reason behind how disheartened Lucian is right now must be related to what I said earlier. In that case, I guess I'll just sacrifice my liver and drink with him. Jonathan gave up and started drinking alongside Lucian. Perhaps he was affected by Lucian's mood, for Jonathan found himself feeling gloomy as well. In the blink of an eye, the two of them finished all the wine on the table. Lucian took out his phone while drawing his brows together tightly from the pain of his headache. He had not driven to the club, so he needed someone to send him back. Perhaps he had drunk too much. He had nearly tapped on Roxanne's name out of instinct when he unlocked his phone. Lucian's frown deepened, and he hovered his finger above the name for a long while. Right when he was about to tap on it, Jonathan's slurring voice rang out in his ear. Lucian, I can't drink anymore. Jonathan was dead drunk by then. He was lifting an empty wineglass and mumbling away in Lucian's direction in a daze. Unlike him, Lucian still had a shred of rationality left. When he heard his voice, he snapped back to his senses and looked at the name beneath his finger. After a long moment of hesitation, he scrolled it away. Since I've decided to cut ties with her, I shouldn't disturb her. After what seemed like eons, Lucian's gaze landed on Aubrey's name. Then, in the end, he tapped on her name. At that moment, Aubrey was having dinner with Frida. Ever since Aubrey left the Farwell residence, she had been swallowing her anger. All she could do was invite Frida out so that she could vent. While the two were chatting, Aubrey's phone suddenly rang. Aubrey was right at the peak of her angry rant, so she impatiently lowered her head to glance at her phone. When she saw the caller ID, she halted her speech immediately. What's the matter? Who is it? Frida asked. Aubrey had already picked up the call by then. Lucian, it's late. Is something the matter? She thought that Lucian had returned to the manor and was calling her after finding out that she had been there in the afternoon. To her surprise, Lucian sounded drunk as he said, "Are you free at the moment? I drank a little. If it's convenient for you, come and pick me up." Aubrey's eyes lit up, and the irritation that had been plaguing her since the afternoon dissipated. "Where are you? I'll be right there." The man then told her the name of the club and the room number. "I'm on my way." Her eager voice made Lucian press his lips together. "You don't need to rush." When Frida saw Aubrey ending the call, she asked, who was it? Was it Lucian? She could not think of anyone else other than Lucian who could make Aubrey's mood change so quickly. Aubrey was all smiles as she answered, let's wrap up for today. Lucian's drunk, and he has asked me to pick him up." Frida beamed in understanding. People usually call their girlfriends to pick them up after getting drunk. It looks like Lucian has a change of heart. "Congratulations, Aubrey." The smile on Aubrey's face widened as she grabbed her bag and stood up. All of a sudden, Frida thought of something. Right. Lucian should be with my brother. I'll come with you and pick my brother up as well." Aubrey agreed to it readily, wanting to get rid of the other man.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.